Most people assume ancient maps were crude sketches made by guesswork, rough coastlines drawn by sailors who barely understood where they were going. But that belief collapses the moment you look closely at certain ancient maps that should not exist at all. Maps that display mathematical precision, global awareness, and scientific understanding that modern historians still struggle to explain. Stay with this story, because once you realize what some ancient map makers knew, history itself begins to feel incomplete. And if hidden knowledge pulls you in, keep watching closely. The most unsettling thing about ancient maps is not what they get wrong. It's what they get right. Some of these maps reveal coastlines accurate to a level that should have required satellites, aerial surveys, and advanced instruments. Yet they were drawn centuries, sometimes millennia, before such technology existed. This creates a problem that historians quietly avoid because there is no comfortable explanation. One of the most controversial examples is the Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. At first glance, it looks like a typical early world map, but when modern scientists overlaid it with satellite data, something disturbing emerged. The coastlines of Africa and South America aligned with shocking accuracy. Even more troubling, the map appears to show Antarctica not as an ice-covered wasteland, but as a detailed ice-free landmass. This should be impossible. Antarctica was officially discovered in the 19th century, and its ice-free shape was only confirmed in the 20th century using radar technology. Yet here it was, drawn centuries earlier. Piri Reis himself claimed he copied much older source maps, some allegedly dating back to ancient civilizations long lost to history. And if that idea already feels uncomfortable, don't scroll away. What kind of civilization could map a continent buried under kilometers of ice? To do so would require advanced surveying techniques, knowledge of Earth's shape, and an understanding of global geography that contradicts everything we're taught about ancient humans. The discomfort deepens when we examine how mathematically sophisticated these maps are. Many ancient maps use accurate latitude measurements, which require understanding Earth as a sphere. This directly challenges the popular idea that ancient societies believed the Earth was flat. In reality, some ancient scholars clearly knew otherwise, and not just vaguely, but with measurable precision. The Orance Find map from 1531 raises even more questions. It also depicts Antarctica in detail, including rivers and mountain ranges that modern science only confirms centuries later beneath thick ice sheets. These are not artistic guesses. These features align with subglacial topography discovered through radar imaging. There is no historical explanation for how this knowledge could have existed. At this point, historians often retreat into safe language, coincidence, exaggeration, misinterpretation. But coincidence stops being convincing when patterns repeat across cultures, continents, and centuries. These maps were not isolated accidents. They were part of tradition. If these maps were copied, then the real mystery lies in the original sources. Maps created by a civilization that possessed advanced global knowledge and then vanished. A civilization whose science was not primitive, but refined. And if that possibility keeps your attention, stay with the story. Ancient Chinese maps add another layer to the mystery. Some early Chinese world maps appeared to depict Africa and the Americas long before official contact. Critics argue these are symbolic, but when analyzed carefully, the proportions and orientations are disturbingly accurate. These are not the distortions of imagination. These are measured shapes. Even medieval European portolan charts, used by sailors, present another challenge. These nautical maps show coastlines, harbors, and distances with precision that modern researchers admit should not have been possible using simple compass navigation. When tested against modern data, their error margins are remarkably low. This forces an uncomfortable question. Were ancient map makers simply copying knowledge from a lost scientific tradition? Mainstream history prefers a neat timeline, ignorance followed by enlightenment, darkness followed by progress. But ancient maps suggest a different pattern entirely. Knowledge may rise, collapse, and rise again. Civilizations may advance further than we admit, only to lose everything to catastrophe, war, or time. Libraries burned, cities sank, empires collapsed. But maps survived, quietly copied, preserved, and misunderstood. And if ancient knowledge could vanish once, it can vanish again. That realization alone should make you pause. Because these maps don't just challenge history, they challenge the assumption that modern civilization is the peak of human intelligence. And if this first layer of the mystery has hooked you, stay with me, because what comes next goes even deeper. If ancient maps were only rough guesses, their mistakes would be obvious. Coastlines would wander randomly. Distances would stretch and shrink without logic. Directions would feel confused. Yet, what unsettles modern researchers is the opposite. Certain ancient maps behave as if their creators understood something fundamental about the Earth that should have been unknown to them. And once you notice this pattern, it becomes impossible to ignore. So stay with the story and keep watching closely. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding ancient maps is longitude. Determining latitude is relatively simple. You can measure the angle of the sun or stars. But longitude is a completely different challenge. To calculate it accurately, you need precise timekeeping, something historians claim did not exist until the invention of advanced clocks in the 18th century. And yet, ancient maps show accurate east-west positioning that should have been impossible. This alone is enough to shake the foundations of historical understanding. The Pyre Reese map resurfaces again here, not because it is famous, but because it exposes a deeper problem. When analyzed mathematically, the map appears to use a projection system centered near modern-day Egypt. This suggests a global coordinate system, not a local or regional one. In other words, whoever created the original source maps understood Earth as a sphere and knew how to project it onto a flat surface. That is not primitive knowledge. That is advanced cartography. And if this realization already has your attention, don't look away. Even more troubling is the accuracy of Port-Ollon charts, medieval nautical maps used by sailors across the Mediterranean. These maps contain no latitude or longitude lines, yet their coastlines match modern maps with stunning precision. When researchers tested them using computer models, they discovered something shocking. These charts behave as if they were created using a lost mathematical grid system, one that later mapmakers copied without understanding. How do you copy something you no longer understand? This suggests a disturbing possibility. Knowledge existed, was recorded, and then partially forgotten. Later generations inherited the results, but not the methods. Ancient Greek sources hint at this loss. Writers like Plato and Aristotle reference maps and geographic knowledge passed down from earlier ages. Plato even described a time when humanity possessed greater understanding before being destroyed by floods and catastrophes. Most people dismiss this as philosophy or myth. But what if it was memory? The Antikythera mechanism supports this uncomfortable idea. Found in a shipwreck, this ancient device is often called the world's first computer. It could predict eclipses, track planetary motion, and model astronomical cycles with astonishing accuracy. If ancient engineers could build such a device, why is advanced mapping suddenly impossible for them? Historians struggle with this contradiction. Ancient astronomers understood precession, planetary cycles, and stellar movements over thousands of years. These calculations require long-term observation and mathematical sophistication. Mapping the Earth using the stars would have been difficult, but not impossible, if you possess the right knowledge. Some ancient maps appear to reflect exactly that. The Chinese star maps offer another layer to the puzzle. Created centuries before European equivalents, they accurately charted the heavens with minimal error. When combined with early Chinese geographic maps, a pattern emerges. Astronomy and geography were deeply linked. Navigation was not guesswork. It was calculation. Yet mainstream history separates these fields as if ancient people lacked the ability to combine them. Then there is the mystery of scale. Many ancient maps maintain consistent proportional distances across vast regions. This implies precise measurement tools. Not ropes, not pacing, but standardized units applied consistently across continents. Where did these standards come from? One unsettling theory proposes the existence of a prehistoric scientific civilization, not global in a modern sense, but advanced enough to understand Earth's geometry. This civilization may have been coastal, reliant on navigation, and eventually destroyed by rising sea levels after the last ice age. Their cities would now lie underwater. Their maps, however, could survive, copied, recopied, altered, preserved. And if that theory sounds extreme, remember this. Modern archaeology has already confirmed that sea levels rose dramatically after the Ice Age, swallowing entire landscapes. Human settlements once existed where oceans now dominate. Maps would have been among the most valuable objects to preserve. Another disturbing detail lies in the precision of ancient latitude markers. Some maps align perfectly with the equator and tropics. This requires not only astronomical observation, but long-term data collection. Short-term observation would not suffice. Someone observed the skies over generations. That level of patience suggests institutional science, not isolated geniuses. And institutions imply civilization. So where is it? Perhaps buried, perhaps erased, perhaps ignored because it does not fit the timeline. The uncomfortable truth is that history prefers simplicity. Complex pasts are inconvenient. They raise questions that have no easy answers. Ancient maps are not dangerous because they are mysterious. They are dangerous because they are precise. And precision leaves no room for excuses. If ancient people knew more than we admit, then modern humanity is not the first to stand on the edge of advanced knowledge. We may simply be the latest. And if this thought makes you uneasy, stay with this story, because the next layer cuts even deeper. At the end of this journey, one question remains. How much knowledge has already been lost, and how much is still hidden in plain sight? Ancient maps, Ice Age coastlines, and the evidence of forgotten global science. What if the most accurate ancient maps were not showing the world as it existed in their own time, but as it existed thousands of years earlier? This single idea changes everything. Because some ancient maps appear to depict coastlines that only make sense if they were drawn before the last ice age ended. Stay with this part carefully, because this is where the mystery stops being historical and starts becoming geological, and if this kind of hidden truth pulls you in, keep watching closely. At the peak of the last ice age, sea levels were dramatically lower than they are today. Vast areas of land that are now underwater were once dry, habitable, and populated. Coastlines were different. Islands were connected. Entire continental shelves were exposed. Modern science confirms this without debate. What remains controversial is this. Some ancient maps seem to reflect those ancient coastlines with disturbing accuracy. The Pyre Reefs map once again becomes impossible to ignore, but not because of Antarctica alone. When researchers compared sections of the map to Ice Age shoreline models, they found alignments that match coastlines from more than 10,000 years ago. This suggests the source material for the map could not have been medieval. It had to be ancient, extremely ancient. And if that idea sounds impossible, remember this. Maps don't invent coastlines. They record them. The same pattern appears in other mysterious maps attributed to ancient sources. Certain outlines of South America on old maps match submerged continental shelves rather than modern shores. These shelves would have been visible only when sea levels were far lower. No medieval sailor ever saw them. No Renaissance explorer mapped them. Yet they appear anyway. This forces an uncomfortable realization. Someone mapped the world when those lands were still above water. Who? Mainstream history offers no answer, because acknowledging this would require rewriting the entire timeline of civilization. It would mean organized, global-aware societies existed far earlier than currently accepted. Societies capable of navigation, astronomy, mathematics, and long-distance coordination. And if that thought makes you uneasy, you're not alone. Ancient myths suddenly begin to feel less mythical when viewed through this lens. Cultures across the world speak of a great flood, a time when lands were drowned and knowledge was lost. These stories appear in Mesopotamia, India, the Americas, and beyond. Historians often dismiss them as symbolic. But geology tells us floods did happen. Not in a single day, but over generations, as melting ice reshaped the planet. Imagine civilizations living along coastlines for thousands of years, building cities, ports, and trade routes. Then imagine those coastlines slowly disappearing. Knowledge would scatter. Survivors would move inland. Maps would become relics of a drowned world. And if that scenario sounds familiar, stay with the story. The idea of a lost global mapping tradition becomes even harder to dismiss when we consider projection accuracy. Some ancient maps use projection systems that minimize distortion across vast distances. These systems require advanced understanding of spherical geometry. They are not intuitive. They are learned. Modern cartographers struggle with projection problems well into the modern era, yet ancient maps appear to solve them effortlessly. This suggests standardization, shared knowledge, a scientific tradition, not a tribe, not a village, a civilization, one that did not survive. Another overlooked detail is the alignment of ancient maps with cardinal directions. True north is not easy to determine without astronomical tools. Magnetic compasses are unreliable due to variation, yet ancient maps frequently align with true north, suggesting long-term celestial observation. This ties mapping directly to astronomy once again. And astronomy, unlike guesswork, leaves little room for error. Some researchers argue that ancient maps reflect a time when Earth's axial tilt was slightly different, altering star positions just enough to suggest extreme antiquity. While this remains debated, the fact that the debate exists at all reveals how deeply these maps challenge accepted history. The most uncomfortable implication of all is this. If ancient people could map the world with such accuracy, then our assumption of linear progress is wrong. Humanity may have reached high levels of scientific understanding before and lost them. Civilization may not be a straight line upward, but a cycle. Rise, advance, collapse, forget, repeat. Maps, unlike buildings, are portable. They survive when cities do not. They can cross centuries, copied by hands that no longer understand their original meaning. Over time, they become puzzles, precise but contextless. This explains why later map makers often added decorations, monsters, and myths to otherwise accurate maps. They preserve the shape, but fill the gaps with imagination. They inherited knowledge without its explanation, and that may be the most haunting part of all, because it means we are not smarter than our ancestors, only luckier. Luckier that our civilization has not yet been erased by climate, catastrophe, or time. Yet, as this part comes to a close, one question refuses to disappear. If ancient maps preserve the memory of a lost world, then how much else has been misclassified as myth simply because it does not fit modern expectations? If this story is reshaping how you see the past, stay with it, because the final part goes where historians are most uncomfortable, into suppression, lost libraries, and the question of whether some knowledge was intentionally buried. Lost libraries suppress knowledge, and why some ancient maps were never meant to survive. By the time we reach this final layer of the mystery, one uncomfortable truth becomes impossible to avoid. Ancient maps are not just confusing because they are advanced. They are disturbing because they survived it all. If such precise knowledge existed in the distant past, then the real question is not how it was created, but why so little of it remains. Stay with this final part carefully, because this is where the mystery turns from accident to intent. And if you care about hidden history, keep watching closely. History likes to present loss as passive. Libraries burn by accident. Knowledge fades naturally. Civilizations forget. But when you examine the destruction of ancient knowledge closely, patterns begin to appear. The disappearance of advanced understanding does not look random. It looks systematic. The most famous example is the Library of Alexandria, often described as the greatest collection of knowledge in the ancient world. It housed texts on astronomy, geography, mathematics, navigation, and science from civilizations across the globe. Some accounts suggest it contained detailed world maps compiled from sources far older than Greek civilization itself. When the library was destroyed, whether through fire, war, or neglect, humanity lost more than books. It lost memory. And maps, once destroyed, cannot be reconstructed from imagination. This is where the mystery deepens. Ancient writers frequently reference texts and maps that no longer exist. They describe geographic knowledge that exceeds what we believe was possible at the time. These references are dismissed because the evidence is gone. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when destruction is involved. Many ancient centers of learning suffered similar fates. Libraries in Mesopotamia, India, China, and the Islamic world were lost to conquest, ideology, or collapse. Each time, knowledge vanished abruptly, not gradually. And each time, the surviving generations were left with fragments they could not fully understand. Maps were especially vulnerable. Unlike stories or myths, maps are dangerous. They show what exists. They reveal coastlines, routes, resources, and strategic knowledge. In times of power struggle, controlling maps meant controlling the world. This is why maps were often restricted, altered, or destroyed. Some historians quietly acknowledge that medieval and early modern authorities deliberately suppressed certain geographic knowledge. Accurate maps were kept from the public. Exploration routes were classified. Knowledge became power, and power was protected. Now consider this. If later civilizations suppressed maps for strategic reasons, why assume ancient civilizations did not do the same? It is entirely possible that some advanced ancient maps were intentionally hidden, locked away, or destroyed to prevent misuse. Others may have been preserved secretly, copied only by select groups who understood their value. This would explain why certain maps suddenly appear centuries later, with no clear origin. The Piri Reis map, for example, did not emerge from a long chain of documented development. It appeared abruptly, already sophisticated, already precise. Piri Reis himself claimed he compiled it from much older source maps, some from Alexander the Great's era, others possibly older. These source maps no longer exist, but their influence remains. This pattern repeats again and again. Medieval map makers sometimes admitted they were copying ancient originals they could not verify. They trusted the shapes, but not the meaning. Over time, maps became layered documents, ancient accuracy buried beneath medieval interpretation. This raises a deeply unsettling possibility. Some ancient knowledge may have survived only because it was misunderstood. The moment it became fully understood, it may have been seen as dangerous. There's another factor historians rarely like to discuss: worldview protection. History is not just about facts. It is about narratives. Narratives create identity. They define who we are and where we came from. If ancient maps suggest advanced civilizations existed long before accepted timelines, then the story of human progress becomes unstable. That instability is uncomfortable. It challenges religious interpretations. It challenges national histories. It challenges the idea that modern civilization is unique. So instead of rewriting everything, it is easier to ignore anomalies. Ancient maps become curiosities rather than evidence. Yet anomalies do not disappear simply because they are inconvenient. Modern technology has made the suppression harder to maintain. Satellite imaging, digital overlays, and mathematical modeling allow researchers to test ancient maps objectively. When patterns align repeatedly, dismissal becomes denial, and denial is not science. What we are witnessing now may be a slow reopening of a sealed chapter of history, not through dramatic announcements, but through quiet acknowledgments, footnotes, cautious language, academic discomfort. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It leaks, and ancient maps are leaking something profound. They suggest that human knowledge is not a straight line from ignorance to enlightenment. It is fragile. It can be lost. It can be hidden. It can be erased. And if it happened before, it can happen again. This realization forces us to confront our own future. Our maps are digital. Our data lives on servers. Our knowledge depends on electricity, stability, and continuity. Remove those, and what remains? Fragments, just like the ancient world left behind. One day, future civilizations may uncover our maps without context. They may wonder how we knew so much, and why we lost it. Ancient maps are not warnings from the past because they are old. They are warnings because they survived. They survived collapse. They survived forgetting. They survived suppression. And they are telling us something we are only beginning to hear. If this journey through forgotten knowledge has changed how you see history, stay curious. Keep watching and subscribe for more stories that challenge what we think we know.